So it appears that the term Geek Watch is being expanded. We're going to talk about that and more on today's episode of the Geek Watch podcast.
This is the Geek Watch podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 249 of the Geek Watch podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, Geek Watch's very own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Hello, Brian.
So we're going to start out today with Geek Watch. We talk a lot about movies and television because those are things that geeks watch.
Yes, the most common amongst the layperson, the one who likes geeky stuff, but maybe don't consider themselves a geek. Like everyone can relate to the Avengers movies.
Yeah, and certainly that geek world has expanded. It did to some degree in the 90s. Of course, with the success of Marvel, more people are getting into that kind of thing. And this is what leads to what we're talking about today, because you and I both are very much into tabletop role-playing games. And we don't normally talk about that type of thing because it's fun and we enjoy talking about it. And there's certainly a lot of news, especially recently, on tabletop role-playing games, but it's not necessarily a spectator sport. I mean, yes, they do movies based off of things like Dungeons and Dragons,
right?
But it's not like people are going to be buying tickets to watch people sit around and play role-playing games at a table. That's something I would have said maybe 5-10 years ago. But now I can't say that anymore.
Right.
Because, yes, people do buy tickets to watch people play games. There was something a little bit like this in Japan, where a very popular thing they would do on video channels is what they call replays. Dating role-playing games in Japan are very popular. They try to date different people in a computer game. They would hack these so they could use them as figures to recap their adventure gaming session with captions, and so they called those replays. During COVID, we had Critical Role, a bunch of geeky voice actors, as they put it, who would sit around a table and play Dungeons & Dragons. They broadcast live on Twitch and on YouTube. It became very popular to a degree where when Twitch's financials got leaked online, it was discovered that Critical Role was the most successful, most watched channel on Twitch.
And I was like, well, this is lucrative.
Yes.
And
so they started making
merchandise and
and it became a thing.
To a TV show.
It led to The Legend of Vox Machina and other role-playing groups like Dimension 20 doing the same thing. And now we've gotten to a place where Division 20 and Critical Role, they are playing theaters. They were doing live plays in front of audiences. And then it turned into arenas. Wow. They were doing things like the Hollywood Bowl and Madison Square Garden. They're literally filling arenas to have people watch them play tabletop role-playing games. And just recently, Critical Role had a 2-night campaign. I guess you could call it a 2-shot, where they had a team-up of 2 seasons of Critical Role, 2 different campaigns. So they had their players basically playing 2 different characters, and people were watching it live. It was also being streamed live in movie theaters via Fathom Entertainment.
That is fantastic. And I was just, before we started recording, I was talking about, we're recording in Charleston, West Virginia, and there is a gaming convention here that is over 20 years old now, called CharCon, which basically started out as Magic the Gathering.
I believe so, yeah.
Yes, just imagine if something like that had been around when it first started. CharCon has grown, and people come from all over the country to this tiny convention here in Charleston to see what tabletop gaming has changed and how it has grown. It's always been very popular amongst a certain demographic of people, but now realizing that everyone can relate to it because it is about a shared experience.
I don't know if I ever mentioned this to you or talked about this. I don't think I've talked about this on the podcast, but in early 1995, I started a game store in Charleston called Other Worlds, and I ran it from early 95 till late 96. It went on after that. I left the store because I was young and stupid, and I was running a game store full-time. I had a full-time day job, and I was going to college full-time during the night. I didn't sleep on the weekends. We had a Vampire the Masquerade LARP that ran Saturday nights, and of course I kept the store open for that. When the sun went down to when the sun came up, the store was open and people were LARPing, and I would go home and I'd sleep for maybe 2 hours, then come back and open the store in the morning on Sunday. You might find this hard to believe, but if you try to run a store full time, don't sleep on the weekends, have a day job, and go to school at night, after a while, you will collapse of exhaustion
I
and put yourself
believe
in the
that.
hospital, which is exactly what I did.
Yeah, it
So
sounds like.
I kind of had to step away from that and heal. And the store went on for a few years after that. And after a while, it didn't become as crucial an issue because other stores began to open up. I've been playing role-playing games since the early 1980s. When I was in high school in 93, 94, I started my high school's first D&D club. Most people were like, what and what now? They had no idea what in the world D&D was. Fortunately, we had a teacher who was a good friend of ours who was willing to be the sponsor for the club. To have a school-sponsored club, you had to have a teacher as a sponsor. She sponsored us. Not really knowing what we were doing, me and a group of people would meet on our lunch breaks. We would go up to the library and play D&D for an hour as we ate. I was that forever DM. I would run for 2 male friends and a female friend. Even from the very beginning, I had women at my table. Just guys, but there were times when different women would be involved in the game. So that, for me, was wonderful because it helps expand the role-playing. But now that it has become so popular, and just this week, Critical Role has announced that they are doing a world tour.
Oh, wow.
They're going to be hitting cities all over the globe so people can come and buy tickets and watch them
play games.
So that's where we are. Is there anything more geek and more watched than tabletop role-playing games now? Not really. So it doesn't seem to me that we need to do that much of a program change, and probably none at all if we want to start talking about role-playing games.
Right. I guess a few years ago, it would have been Ren Fairs. That would have been the closest thing to geekdom.
Well, the thing about it is, this has been a world phenomenon for a while. I mean, when you look at Brazil in the 90s, when role-playing games really started to pick up there, a lot of students who were decently well off and had parents who could afford to send them to America to go to school, they would come back with these books written in English with D&D and other role-playing games.
Explain how you can play a wizard with dice.
It really blew up there to a degree where really in the 80s, role-playing became a very popular thing. If you were cool, you did. It started out as something that the rich kids were able to do because they went north and brought it back. They would take the staples out of the books and Xerox them. They called them Xerox kids because they couldn't get those books until eventually some people at TSR and White Wolf figured out, hey, there's this real thing going on in Brazil, and he started translating all this stuff into Portuguese. And it really blew up there and is big to this day. The game that's really popular in Brazil since the 90s has been Vampire the Masquerade.
Yep.
You know, and they started LARPing in the 90s like a lot of us did, and they're still doing it like many people still are. So it's hugely popular. But it is a world event. In Japan, there are 2 things that people are shocked about when it comes to role-playing. One, the numbers of women who tabletop role play are pretty much even with the guys, and sometimes arguably more.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that.
So it's extremely popular there. But the go-to game for the Japanese is Call of Cthulhu.
Of course it is. That's as close to their monsters as any American writer has ever got.
Well, the thing about
the old ones look like they're demons.
Yeah. Well, something that's really promoted role-playing in Japan has been, like you say, anime, because there was an anime that you had a female anime girl who was the lead character, and she's disguised herself. Arletep is disguised as this anime girl. You have
That's
this
perfect.
cutesy flying Cthulhu that flies around her, but there are also, Lovecraftian monsters that appear. So it's a cutesy thing, but it's also a scary thing. There is so much homebrew that goes on for these Cthulhu games.
Lovecraft was writing kaiju kind of around the time that kaiju was appearing on screen. So
it is a world event. And of course, with Stranger Things putting Dungeons and Dragons back into the consciousness, and of course, what Critical Role has done and Dimension 20 has done on top of that, it's blown up in a huge way. It's fun to be able to talk about something that we're both passionate about, something we both do, and something that has absolutely no drama attached to it whatsoever. Let's talk a little drama.
I guess I was unaware of the drama.
Oh, because you have geek-colored glasses.
I do.
And I have a gluttony for punishment. So let's talk a little bit of drama.
Okay.
It's not bad drama, but it's a little bit of drama.
Okay.
Because we can definitely talk about Hasbro.
Yes, I knew that. And the only reason I knew that Hasbro owned Dungeons and Dragons is because Mattel owns Barbie. So we'll never get a Dungeons and Dragons Barbie.
Yeah.
That's disappointing. So that's the only reason I know.
What you may be aware, of course, is that they just came out with the 2024-2025 version. I guess you could call it version 5.5 or version 5e, where they've tweaked a few things.
I'm playing Icewind Dale right now, so I don't know if that's a part of the new thing or that's,
well, it
I'm
isn't
not
right.
sure.
I mean, they've come out with a new monster manual, new player's handbook, new Dungeon Master's guide, and they've tweaked a few things. It's not like a completely different edition. It's still 5e, but there were some things that they tweaked and some things that some people like, some people don't. But some things started to happen after those books came out. One of them was Sigil, which I don't even, and you're looking at me like I've never heard of it.
I have never heard of that.
Which is a absolute tragedy, because Wizards of the Coast really, really wanted people like us to hear about Sigil.
Okay.
It is a virtual tabletop online. It's like Roll20.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Which we've played
on
Foundry.
It was big during COVID. Roll20 was.
They came out with their own version of a virtual tabletop called Sigil, which nobody seems to know about and no one seems to be all that interested in, which was a complete tragedy for them because they spent millions of dollars to get this going.
Ooh.
The problem is the boomers at Hasbro heard Dungeons and Dragons and computers and thought, oh, this is going to make us as much money as Baldur's Gate 3. It's the game and it's a tabletop and things like that. Baldur's Gate 3, that's Dungeons and Dragons, right? They've been trying to tie it into things like D&D Beyond, where they were really trying to move into a digital footprint because it's a lot cheaper to have digital copies instead of putting out paper copies and sticking them in stores. So they really wanted to push that. But they're developing Sigil at the same time when D&D Beyond is working on their own virtual tabletop. So Hasbro is literally paying for two different digital tabletops that are competing against each other.
Yeah,
because the left hand's not talking to the right hand, basically. So that became a thing. You can get into it now. It costs you to do so. And there's still a bunch of stuff that needs to be done to it. It's not quite ready for prime time. The way they made it looked amazing. It looked 3D, 3D fields. You have your figures in 3D and these 3D environments that you can build yourself. It's impressive. It certainly looked impressive what they were advertising. But again, you have things already like Roll20, which is simpler, but very popular and mostly free.
And free.
Yeah. And Foundry, which is not quite free, but it's ridiculous the amount of stuff you can do on it. It's insane. So they had their Sigil launch and it was underwhelming. Hasbro decided to lay off 3/4 of their development staff for Sigil. They got rid of 2 of their main creatives who were responsible for D&D for over a decade, and they wound up leaving literally after the last of the 3 2025 books was put out. Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford, both big names in Wizards of the Coast and D&D, basically retired. They left. They decided to retire. And people started to see that as writing on the wall, like rats leaving the ship, because a bunch of people had already been fired. So there was that question, are they leaving now so they can go out on their own terms? Or were they thinking, well, we either leave or they're going to make us leave? And last week, Jess Lanzillo, who was the president of Wizards of the Coast and head of D&D, left. I don't know if she was fired, but it kind of sounded like she was, because they replaced her with somebody else. His first announcement this week is that they are going to put Dungeons and Dragons under what they call a franchise license. What a franchise license means is that every part of D&D, the publishing side of it, the licensing side of it, everything is going to be under one roof, under one branch of leadership. It's going to be that one group is going to take care of everything, which is going to be a problem. And the reason being is that all things aren't equal. So they're going to look at D&D as in its entirety as a money-making business, which makes sense. But they're going to focus on the parts of D&D that make them money, and the parts that don't, they're just not going to bother with. Now, what makes them money? Selling the licenses off, selling the licenses to movie theaters so they can make movies out of it, selling them to gaming companies so that they can make D&D slot machines, which digital slot machines. And that's a deal's already, the ink's drying on.
Okay.
They've come out with a dragon adventure anthology called Dungeon Delves. These are one-shot adventures that you can put into your campaign, each featuring a different colored dragon. It's a good introduction if you've never played D&D before. There are different campaigns for different levels. They've also got a book coming out that's an Eberron book, bringing back the artificers, as they essentially cut from the main book, because it was basically an Eberron thing. And so there's going to be some official rules for artificers again, because they've nerfed them to a huge degree. And so next month we'll see that. But are they going to be putting out any more books? Well, after what happened with 2024, 2025 books that didn't do so well.
It's like it'll go all digital on one of these,
well,
on
it may
Sequel.
not, well, see, first of all, there was a lot of controversy because it looked like Wizards of the Coast was using a lot of AI art for their D&D books. And for Wizards of the Coast, Magic the Gathering has always been the cash cow, and it's paid for everything else. But if D&D books aren't doing well, and the money is coming from licensing the name, why put out new stuff for D&D if it's not going to make money? And after last quarter earnings were in the tank across the board, they're looking to cut costs. That's why they're firing a bunch of people, especially game developers. So it doesn't look good for D&D as far as a game you want to play. There's talk about after these last two books come out, you might not see anything new for D&D for the next 10 years. Their top creatives are gone. Chris Perkins and Jeremy Crawford, who were the ones who developed a lot of the stuff for D&D over the last decade. It turns out that they're unretired now. They are now working for Darrington Press, the makers of Daggerheart.
Okay.
The new hotness from Critical Role, the role-playing game. They are now the head of Darrington Press's creative team. That is a very interesting development. So now you have basically what was the face of creativity at Wizards of the Coast, especially when it came to D&D, now doing Daggerheart stuff. This just came out. I don't know if the news broke last night or sometime today, but Jess Zillow, the president of Wizards of the Coast, who now gone, is now the creative director of White Wolf, the makers of Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf, all of that. I knew something was up because they announced last week that they were coming back with the White Wolf name. White Wolf was the name of the company that first published all of the World of Darkness books. And they said that they were going to start calling themselves as a company White Wolf again. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. They're wanting to say, hey, you remember all that stuff you loved in the 90s? We're bringing it back. And so now you have the past president of Wizards of the Coast now being their creative director. And so things are getting really interesting. So although things don't look very good for Wizards of the Coast and Dungeons and Dragons, it's starting to look pretty decent across the board elsewhere.
For all the other role-playing games that...
Oh, yeah. Because Daggerheart, it's been reported in more than one place that Daggerheart's outselling D&D, and it makes sense to me. We've talked privately about Daggerheart, and maybe that might be something we can break down eventually.
Right.
I love Daggerheart's system.
Yep.
Especially with the type of people that I like to play tabletop role-playing games with, the thing. And again, this may be, maybe we can talk about this in a little more depth, but it has been very interesting to see how well this has taken off. And Critical Role, who used to be the biggest D&D players, I mean, they were a huge part of people
turning to D&D and getting into role-playing.
Well, they're playing Daggerheart now.
Yep.
It's their game.
Yeah.
They have been running a campaign in Daggerheart based off of a campaign frame that Matt Mercer came out with called Age of Umbra. And it's been huge for Critical Role. It's been getting great ratings. Tons of people are watching it, and it's been extremely popular. One of the most popular shows they've had in a while. So it's definitely, like I said, Wizards of the Coast are having a bad day of it, but for the most part, independent companies and other companies are having a lot of good news. Except for one thing. It always got to end on a bad note. Diamond Distributors is a company that distributes comics and role-playing games. In the 90s, when I was running the game store, I considered doing comic books. But Diamond Distributors was the only place where you could get comic books from anybody. And I didn't want to deal with them because they were very difficult to deal with. They were the 800-pound gorilla. They were the only game in town. They were the only place you could get that stuff. And they had rules like, if you want to buy comics from us, you don't order individual comics. What you do is you tell us what your budget is, and we will send you the comics you're going to sell. So that became an issue because you know what titles you're going to sell, but then you get a bunch of titles that sit on the shelves because nobody's interested in them. There have been some other companies that are now doing distribution. Places like Marvel and DC figured out they can't be held up by Diamond all the time. So they started to work with other companies to diversify, which is a good thing because Diamond has just declared bankruptcy. Why this is extra, extra bad is because Diamond is a distributor. That means they have warehouses full of comic books and games because they distribute role-playing games and board games, but they do that on consignment, which means that they don't pay for the stuff that they get in from companies. The companies just give it to them, and then they sell them, and once they do, they give the companies their cut back. But until it's sold, it just sits in a warehouse. Nobody's making any money off of it. So what happened was Diamond declared bankruptcy. And part of the bankruptcy hearing with the judge, they said, hey, look, we got all this stuff in our warehouses. We want to be able to sell it so we can pay off our creditors, our loans, and all that. The problem is, it's like, obviously, if
it's not theirs.
Isn't theirs to sell.
Right.
And all the money is going to go to Chase Bank. Literally hundreds of companies have just...
That was Marvel, Dark Horse, Hasbro.
Goodman Games. I mean, all kinds of different companies. Fortunately, not Darrington Press. They have their own distribution through Ingram. But a lot of medium and small companies that were dealing with Diamond because even though they weren't the only game in town, they were still the biggest game in town. So if you wanted to see their stuff in bookstores, you had to go through Diamond. Well, they've lost their entire inventory. Now, you may be thinking, wait a minute, if it's not their stuff, how can they sell it? That doesn't even sound legal. Well, there's a whole bunch of weird stuff involved in the consignment business.
Yeah. Contracts and
yeah, there's a contract that you have to sign off on every year. That's really complicated paperwork.
in their possession, it belongs to them.
Right. If you don't fill out this paperwork every year, then you're giving up your rights to getting the stuff back. Most people didn't bother to do it because it's too complicated. A lot of companies have lost their entire inventories to Diamond. And that includes Pathfinder.
Yes.
Pathfinder has lost the vast majority of their stuff, including books. Books that they announced were coming out this year are now no longer coming out unless you go to Ollie's.
Oh.
Because it'll probably be sitting
in a wholesale. Oh.
Yeah, straight to wholesale.
Yes.
So that really sucks.
And all the bin stores and PVC outlets.
Yeah, in the meantime, there are a bunch of companies that are going to go out of business because their investment is gone. There have been a few companies that are filing a lawsuit, and hopefully they're going to be able to reverse this. One of their arguments is, hey, you're doing Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It's not like full-blown bankruptcy where you're liquidating everything for the creditors. Chapter 11 is we're trying to reorganize so that we can get back into business. Their argument is, hey, with a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, we still have the rights to get our stuff back. They're not going out of business. They are still trying to stay in business. They don't have the legal right to keep our stuff and sell it off.
You can't count our merchandise as your assets.
It's because you're not going full-blown...
My goodness.
Yeah, bankruptcy. And so hopefully that's the situation. Here we are. We're talking about tabletop role-playing games. Look at all the good news, bad news, good news, bad news.
Right.
So that gives us stuff to talk about. I will say there's one other thing, and I will touch on this rather briefly. There is one piece of terminology from tabletop role-playing that I think has become very useful when talking about the type of stuff that we tend to. You're familiar with the term metagaming, metagamer, right? People who are gaming using information outside of the game.
That your character does not know, but the player knows.
I have borrowed that term to talk about something I'm going to start referring to as MetaMedia. I really do believe, and we've talked a lot about how movies and television have changed over the last few years. And I've always tried to figure out some sort of unification theory for where a lot of this was coming from. I now have that term, and it's MetaMedia. I feel that a lot of the issues that we're seeing in geek television and movies is that it's no longer about story anymore. It's about what the audience knows about what's behind the scenes as well. That's part of the whole situation. Stories are about the audience because you're trying to entertain the audience. When the backstage stuff is part of the show.
Yes.
It's not just about people online talking about it. I always wondered if the reason why I hear it all the time is because I'm in that bubble. The algorithm feeds it to me a lot. You don't seem to hear about it as much as I do, but you have geek-colored glasses.
I hear about other things, though.
And I think most of that's my fault. But I always wondered if, is this a me thing? I have started noticing that it's appearing in the media itself. There are references to stuff behind the scenes that are literally part of the story. It started out in small ways where you had companies who were trying to create memes out of their stuff, which of course never works. It never works at all. We talk about Morbin time. They tried to do the Barbieheimer thing with Wicked and Gladiator 2, which didn't work because it was the audience who did that. The audience does things like Chicken Jockey and things like that. I've also noticed that there are references to behind the scenes stuff showing up in the shows now. You recently had the first part of season 2 of Sandman.
Yes, I haven't got to watch any of it, but I'm just excited.
Yeah. But if you see any news articles about it, it's like the part 1 of the next season of Sandman is out, one line. And then the rest of the article is about, written by Neil Gaiman. In case you had forgotten, here is a 10-page article discussing it all again.
Well, that's because the ones that I get about it are talking about their clothes.
Right.
Like they have a whole scene about what they're wearing to family dinner. The big thing is about their fashion and what they're wearing. And there's a whole scene about, why doesn't he have to wear what we're wearing? And they're like, come on, he's wearing a burqa. Those into my algorithm. I can see what you're saying. And when you first started talking about it, I was thinking about the stories behind the scenes make people connect with it more. One of the most well-known stories about actors who weren't acting was Mandy, Princess Bride. I Want My Father Back
Yeah.
was within the last years at home with his family, and he was just as emotional, and people are wanting to connect with it more
Right.
and wanting to know what these actors are going through. And maybe that could be a part of it, that people are wanting to connect with their entertainment more than they ever have before.
Yeah. That's definitely a part of it. Going back to the 90s, not everything that came out of the 90s was good.
No.
One of them was Ain't It Cool News. And
Yes.
we've talked about that before. And the idea of how they basically invented the comment section. And the internet's been toxic ever since. And to some degree, I've been guilty of that myself. Even on this very microphone, I have gotten a bad case of critic brain and have done that. In fact, this isn't the first version of this particular podcast that we did, because we did record 149 where I talked about Doctor Who and ditched the whole thing, because as I'm listening to it, I'm like, I'm going down that damn road. I'm doing it again. And, that plus the fact that obviously you didn't have a lot to say in that podcast and nobody's tuning in to listen to me. You're the one they're listening to.
Oh.
But I started to see that. And especially with what happened in Doctor Who right after, which was, we got the season finale. And I'll get back to that in just a second. But this idea of bringing in memes into the story itself, like in the X-Men movie, I can't remember which one. It may have been The Last Stand. You have a lot of X-Men where you have the Juggernaut, and he goes, I'm the Juggernaut, bitch. Unless you were chronically online, you didn't get that meme at all. They referenced the meme in the movie. You have things like She-Hulk, where they're talking about the people who are online criticizing She-Hulk. They were parodying them in the show, basically targeting part of their own audience. They made references to it. You have the second Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix and Lady Gaga, and which was basically nothing but a massive troll, because the first movie was extremely successful, made a lot of money, but the director was very disturbed by the fact that there were a bunch of edgelords that thought the Joker was a hero. So he made a second movie basically trolling all of them. He turned it into a musical. He figuratively castrated your main character and made a joke out of it. And it was all to basically say, hey, everybody who liked that character for the wrong reasons, I'm going to crap all over it. The movie had nothing to do with entertainment.
Now, see, Spielberg didn't want a sequel made to E.T., so he wrote a terrible script, E.T. 2, to make sure that the studio didn't make a sequel. This kind of backfired on that director.
Well, here's the thing. He made exactly the movie he wanted to make.
Okay.
Technically speaking, he made the movie he wanted to make. He didn't want to make it at all.
Right.
But they're like, it made over $1 billion. We want the second movie. And he's like, don't you understand, your audience who came to see this movie for the most part are a bunch of edgelords, incels. And I don't want to entertain them. And so he basically said, okay, if I got to do this, I'm going to troll all of them. I'm going to make this film be a spit in the face to everybody who liked the first movie. Now, the question is, what makes that a good film? Well, nothing makes it a good film. Unless you're down to see a movie troll an audience, there's really no point in watching it at all. But now we're in a situation where, going back to Doctor Who, the ending of the season is all about the stuff that's going on behind the scenes with the audience. They addressed it in more than one way. And I know you haven't seen the ending yet.
No.
And you've managed to avoid spoilers. I don't want to say anything. The ending was shocking and sudden. because that's what it was in the world. The ending was tied into all the stuff we've been talking about, what was swirling around the show itself. And Ironheart finished. I don't want to go into too much Ironheart. I know you haven't seen that either. But Ironheart was very self-referential. And the ending is very polarizing. It's so polarizing, I don't know what I think about it. This would definitely be something we can talk about later. Regardless of what you think about it, I get it. I understand it.
Okay.
Even for people that I know really well, like you, with geek-colored glasses on. I can't say with certainty what you're going to think about this.
Okay.
It's that weird. We are now reaching this saturation of what I'm going to start calling MetaMedia.
MetaMedia.
Because, again, I know about a lot of the backstage stuff. You've managed to avoid some of that backstage stuff, but now it's becoming part of the show.
Okay. See, a few years ago, it was product placement.
Yeah.
Like,
now
man, I just love my new Prius. It's got this great backup camera.
There you go. But by the way, product placement has ruined movies for me. There's one piece of product placement that I never talk about. I know about it, but if you know about it, it will ruin a lot of movies for you.
Oh.
That's why I've never told you, because I don't want to ruin something for you. There is a piece of product placement that if you know about it, I'll put it to you this way. It ruined the ending of Falcon and the Winter Soldier for me.
Oh, okay. Return of the Killer Tomatoes, it was great, but any other time.
But there was a product placement that gave away the ending.
Oh, no.
This piece of product placement will always give away the ending. If there's a secret, this product placement will wreck it every single time.
Oh, no.
That's why I don't talk about it. Now that you're seeing a lot of shows addressing what people are saying, because so much is weighed in on how the audience reacts. With Ironheart, there were so many bad reviews before anyone ever saw a frame of it. And regardless of what you think of the show, it's very polarizing. A lot of people have said, I said this show was going to be bad, and it was exactly what I said it was, which is arguable. Maybe you were right, maybe you were wrong. But let's be honest. If you never saw the show and didn't like it, we know why. There were only one or two reasons you could go on as to why you didn't like the show. So don't say that's not what it was, because that's all you had. We are now reaching a place where it affects how the shows go. It's now affecting whether shows stay on the air or not. But it's now actually becoming a part of the show where the story references these things, where they're breaking the fourth wall. And if you don't know what that's referencing, you don't get why they're doing what they're doing. It's like, if you don't know that they hated this character and they hated this other character, and they talk trash about both of them, and now you get both of them in the same scene, which happened in a show that, again, not trying to spoil anything, just in case you haven't seen it yet, but that happened. And it was like, oh, that's an interesting thing. You have to understand what was going on behind the scenes to understand the point of that scene. I want you to be able to keep your geek-colored glasses. I don't want shows to not make sense to you because you're not as dumb as I am to follow a lot of this stuff. But at the same time, you can't make a good show that way. You just can't, especially if you're using the audience as a barometer. You have to write good stuff and put it out there and let the audience do what they're going to do. You can't make the meme, and you can't make everybody happy, but you certainly can't write a good story that way. Stories are getting dumbed down in a huge way because people are worried about being misinterpreted, or they're worried that the wrong group of people are going to like their stuff, and people are going to be like, now you think I'm an incel. That's all tied into it. None of that makes any sense because they can't do any of that stuff. They have all these other concerns that they've got to deal with. And all the stuff going on behind the scenes affected the type of story they told over the last few seasons and completely changed the ending of the finale. I'm not going to say how they changed it, but it's not a spoiler to say that they refilmed the ending completely based on stuff that had nothing to do with the show itself, but stuff that happened outside of it. They reshot the entire ending. The problem with the season finales of Doctor Who was the ending just seemed so tacked on. Well, it was tacked on. They had to tack it on because they had to change the complete ending. And they had to do it because of the stuff going on outside that they had to deal with. And it shouldn't be that way. It just shouldn't. I want to enjoy stuff. And I want there to be stuff out there that I do enjoy for what it is. Is that stuff coming? I guess we'll see.
We shall see.
And with that said, we come to the end of episode 149. Thank you for listening, and tune in next time for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. From Mandy Petrie, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.